So I'm not the biggest fan of Joel Osteen. Some people put me in categories, but if you were to I don't like the categories, but if you were to put me in one of those, it would be against Joel Osteen. But there's something going on Twitter right now, a tweet that is kind of caught fire and gone all over the place, talking about Joel Osteen that I feel like I need to defend him. Ugh, that sounds weird coming out of my mouth. But this tweet right here from Michael Clear, he decided to tweet this out. Not sure exactly why, but he tweeted out, and I want you to see. Like, ooh, that's not what I wanted. Figuring out some stuff. All right. I want you to see. Like, look at this. 30.7 thousand retweets. All right, that's huge. 100,000 likes, 7,000 quote tweets. This thing is going everywhere, and everybody has an opinion. And I thought it would be kind of interesting to kind of break this down as someone who's been in pastoral ministry in the States. Currently I'm in Canada, but I've done pastoral ministry in the States. I get what it takes and what you have to do. So I'm not sure if Michael does, though. But he says some things that is also like there's some good points here. All right, so let's just look at this thing. Pastor Joel Osteen pays himself an annual salary of $54 million. Whoa. From his church profits, he had a custom garage built with 20 car stalls for each of his custom vehicles. His favorite is a Ferrari 458 Italia that cost $270,000 a vehicle. $270,000. He lives in a 70,000 square foot mansion. A lot of people, they just think of Joel Osteen and they think of the nice guy smiling on the stage. He goes someplace at night, and apparently it's a 70,000 square foot mansion. In the New Testament, four different times, Jesus tells his followers to always pay their taxes. Why is it in the United States that churches don't have to pay taxes? The IRS figures if all churches paid their fair share of 15% taxes, that it would total over $2 trillion a year. More than enough to solve the homelessness in this country, since it looks like these pastors would rather spend your donations on new cars instead of feeding the hungry. Some harsh words from this man. And again, people are resonating with it. Look at those numbers, just continue to climb. And if you go through the comments, there's not a lot of defense for Joel Osteen. So it seems like a lot of people are resonating with this. And I kind of wanted to share a few things. All right. First off, I don't know whether these numbers are accurate. Okay. And that's a problem. That is a transparency problem when it comes to Lakewood Church and Joel Osteen himself. No one knows what he makes. It's guessed. His net worth is a guess. There, like, people have seen him and taken pictures. Like, he talks about this Ferrari 458 Italia. I don't know. I don't know if he actually owns that, but he did drive it at some point, and people took some pictures. But we don't know exactly what he has, but it seems to be extravagant. Anytime you see him, he's wearing really expensive clothes, driving an expensive car. So that is a point that needs to be considered. But just because one pastor, okay, just because one pastor lives an extravagant lifestyle and definitely, I think, takes advantage of the monetary situation of his church, then doesn't mean that every pastor does that. All right. Now, certainly there are more pastors than just Joel Osteen who lives this kind of lifestyle, but there are far more pastors who are bivocational, who are barely making ends meet. And he also says some things here in this tweet that are just inaccurate. Okay. He says basically that Joel Osteen doesn't pay taxes. And that's why I have it in the thumbnail, because that's what this guy is saying. Note that he doesn't pay taxes. He does. There are certain taxes that do need to be paid from a pastor. Now, most pastors actually have to do that from their own money. Like, they pay their own taxes. A lot of times, taxes are deducted for you from your workplace. Well, pastors don't get that. There's no one at the church who's taking that money out for them. They have to go and figure things out, and it's very confusing and it's very scary. Like, you got to think about, like, oh, I gotta pay the exact right amount and all of that, and it comes out of your own money, it comes out of your own pocket, and so it's very confusing. But pastors do it. So, and we know that that's true because, or at least that it should be done because the Bible says so. He is right. Michael is right when he tweets about that. And for this reason, this is here in 1 Timothy 5. And for this reason, you pay taxes since the authorities, or this is Romans 13, sorry. And for this reason, you pay taxes since the authorities are God's servants, continually attending to these tasks. Pay your obligations to everyone. Taxes to those who owe to those you owe taxes, tolls to those you owe tolls, respect to those you owe respect, and honor to those you owe honor. And Jesus does say, he looks at the coin and says, whose face is on this? Given to Caesar that which is Caesar's. That's biblical. Everyone needs to do that. Everybody. Not just pastors, but that also includes pastors. So Michael is right in saying that, hey, this needs to be done, that taxes need to be paid, but pastors do pay taxes. Just because the church as an organization doesn't necessarily pay the same taxes as a local business doesn't mean that the workers, the pastors aren't paying those taxes. Now, 1 Timothy 5 also says, the elders who are good leaders are to be considered worthy of double honor, especially those who work hard at preaching and teaching. For the scripture says, do not muzzle an ox while it is treading out the grain, and the worker is worthy of his wages. So if you go back over here and you think about that, and like, a pastor should get paid, and they shouldn't have to skimp. They shouldn't have to buy all their clothes at Value Village. They shouldn't have to, feed their families from, like, always the discount meat. Like, there are lots of things that pastors, if you've been a pastor, maybe you are, or your pastor, or you have a small church. These are things that most likely most pastors are dealing with. They're trying to make ends meet. Now, if you compare that with Joel Osteen, that's quite the contrast. Like, now it becomes a question. I think what Michael is really getting at is the extravagant lifestyle. And if there are pastors who can live this extravagant lifestyle, and that their churches aren't paying taxes, and they're benefiting from that, because Joel Osteen is benefiting from that. Is that right? Now, and his conclusion is, well, we just make all the churches pay the taxes. All the churches have to pay the taxes, and that'll feed the homeless. Not necessarily true. Look at how the government functions. Like, I'm just saying, like, the government, I don't think, is prepared to actually do that kind of extensive work with people and making sure that homelessness is resolved. Now, that's a problem that the church is continually fighting, or at least should be. But his solution here of, well, the church should just pay all the taxes, and then we won't have all the problems that the government kind of lets the church slide a little bit, because they're trying to resolve these issues like homelessness and doing charity work and all of those things that the government would say is a benefit to society. But also, there is a stark line that needs to be drawn at some point between the separation of church and state. And that's not being considered here. That how much taxes does the government force on the church? What kind of things would make someone pay more taxes or less taxes? Does it have anything to do with your beliefs? Does it have anything to do with what's trendy as far as your beliefs? It's a very slippery slope when you start to figure out, okay, yes, the government should be able to enforce some kind of taxing of local churches. It's one thing to look at Joel Osteen and say, hey, this guy has too much money. And that's not right for a pastor, and there are people who are suffering. So maybe if they paid their taxes, then those people wouldn't suffer as much. Maybe we can do something about that. But that's not looking at the big picture. The big picture is most pastors are not living this extravagant lifestyle. The big picture is that the government isn't quite prepared to deal with some of the things that local churches do on a regular basis, or at least should do on a regular basis. And the big picture is that there has to be some kind of distinction between the government and religion, and whether the government can step in and tell religious organizations like local churches what to do and how much they have to pay. Because again, how do you stop that? New legislation gets passed because it's trendy. All of a sudden, different people based on their beliefs are having to pay a little bit more to the government. They're going to have to pay a little bit of a price. Now, I did want to kind of note also, some of the extravagant things that I found. I saw this tweet and I started doing a little bit of research on Joel Osteen. And like I said, it's very hard to figure out exactly how much this guy makes and what he has. There are claims in this tweet that I just can't find any actual proof for, but I did find it interesting right here. I did not know that Lakewood Church bought, or maybe I did and I just forgot, but Lakewood Church bought Compaq Center. Compaq, remember that? But they bought it for $7.5 million. And the vote for that was 13-2. There was an interesting quote that I thought was fascinating on how it all went down. There's a lot of excitement from Joel Osteen's side, but one of the council members, Costello, called the transaction a fire sale from a distressed owner on Monday and disputed many of the assumptions that city officials and appraisers used to set the $7.5 million price for the 606,000 square foot building in the former home of the Houston Rockets. The converted church arena sits on 7 acres in the Greenway Plaza area along the Southwest Freeway. So they got it for a deal, and at a time, it seems, when the city was really struggling. And I find that to be just a little sketchy to me, of a church taking advantage of the city. And obviously there being hurt feelings along the way in getting that center that they wanted, and to get out from that lease and to pay only $7.5 million for a 606,000 square foot building. That's kind of crazy in downtown Houston. Now, there's other stuff that could be talked about. Lots of talk about how many cars he has. Those are things that we can't actually know, which is interesting. Just once again, the issue of transparency rearing its ugly head. Nobody knows. It's interesting, for as big of a figure as Joel Osteen is, there's not a lot of pictures of him outside of Lakewood Church. There's not a lot of interviews on what his home is like, what he does in his free time, who he is as a person. It's all the ministry, which, is just a little interesting to me, that all of that stuff is kind of held back. It's secretive. And I don't think that's appropriate, especially for someone as a prominent figure as Joel Osteen is, regardless of his theology. I don't agree with his theology. I don't agree with the model of ministry there at Lakewood Church. But I would hope that someone with such a position would be a little bit more transparent about what they actually do with the finances, what they're about. They don't have to give everyone out like their W-2s and all that, but maybe just letting people know where they're coming from a little bit more, I think, would save a little bit on that. Now, let me know what you guys think about all this down in the comments section. I'm sure that there's probably not a lot of love for Joel Osteen, but I do think that there's some defense here that needs to be said for him. And when it comes to the ideas of how the church works with the government and how the government shouldn't supersede and all of that, and how taxes are done and how pastors do pay their taxes is just a little bit different than maybe some of the people that are criticizing this. It's complicated. Taxes are not fun. Anyways, this is going to redirect into an afterlife where I'll be hanging out for a couple minutes and answering any questions you might have on this. And if you're watching on the replay, YouTube's going to have a video right over here that they think you should watch, and maybe you should. I'll see you in the next one. Hey, hey, hey.